Bom dia para quem é de bom dia, boa noite para quem é de boa noite, 93 para quem é de 93, paz profunda para quem é de paz profunda. Você está no Projeto Mayhem e hoje a gente vai entrevistar um autor inglês que também é o coordenador geral, né, o editor-chefe da Lewis Masonic, a maior e mais importante editora maçônica. E para você entender o que a gente vai falar, você vai precisar colocar turn on subtitles and change to Portuguese. E aí você vai entender o que a gente fala. And now I can speak in English and talk to her. Welcome, Martin Faulks. Wonderful to have you here in the show.
Oh, it's superb to be here. It's a real honour to be able to talk to you.
The first part of the interview, I would like to ask you about your life. You are mostly well known in the Masonic community, but our readers are non-Masonic and people from all other religions and beliefs, and people from all over Brazil. So I would like to talk to you about your life. And you started in Masonic like 30 years ago, but before, I usually joke, I said, when you were a child, you were at the church, and now several years ago, then you are the main publisher house in Masonic books. How did that happen?
Yes, so it's an interesting journey actually. So, in my childhood, I was born in a town, a city called Norwich in Norfolk, in England. So imagine this sort of it's not a very massive place, and it's sort of quite out in the country. And yes, neither of my parents were spiritually inclined or religious. They're both. My mother's a sort of a food scientist specializing in dietary things, and my father's a food scientist specializing in food absorption. So I'm born in this sort of little house, in Norfolk, and they're both studying science. Now, people always ask me about this because aside from my interest in Freemasonry, my life has been a quest for enlightenment. Anyone watching this in Brazil, if you have a look, if you put my name into searches, you'll see me sitting in India next to yoga teachers, or in the mountains of Japan with Buddhists. But you also see me, go to a Christian monastery to learn their memory methods. Anywhere where there's wisdom and there's someone who's better at what I'm trying to do, I'll be at their side. When I was young, I didn't know anything about any of these things. I didn't know about the potential of the mind, but I knew there was something more. So I can remember when I saw, superhero things, comics and television shows, I thought, this is definitely going to happen somehow. There's definitely some more potential here. And what started me off really was I was quite young when I was taken to a martial art class. I must have been 6 or 7, and my mother took me to a Korean martial art called Hapkido. You might also know it by Kuksul Won. That teacher, they was teaching me the physical movements, but they started to talk about different meditation techniques, different ways to use your breath, different ways to use your internal energy. And in that moment, I found what I was looking for. And my friend and I, he's gone off and become a Swami in the yoga tradition. But my friend and I, we went to every martial art class we could. We used to go to 4 lessons during the week, and then at the weekend we go to the special lessons on our own. And we spent years learning this together. And anything they told us to do, we'd try. So if the teacher said, this is an ancient technique, if you breathe in this way, you'll have the strength of 7 men. We'd practice that and practice that and practice that, and then come back and say, doesn't work. What are we doing wrong? I think because we're so young, everything they told us we tried out. So fast forward through this, I'm not paying attention at school as much as I used to or should do, you know, before martial arts. The school actually let me practice martial arts at lunchtime. They put up a bag because we won the UK championships. So they really let us practice. It was a lovely thing. And they were quite proud of us. But this testing continued. They gave us some special strikes, you know, that you hit here, it can knock a person unconscious. Wow, on the arm. So we tried it, we couldn't get it to work. So we went to the teacher and said, this isn't true. And he said, yes, it is. It's the acupuncture point. You've got to get it just right. So we went to an acupuncturist and we paid him to mark the spots, and we got a hammer to hit it. It still didn't work. Well, not all of them. So that's my life has been a search like that. Now, when I first heard about Freemasonry, I heard negative things about it. You know, so I heard people talking at a family gathering, and they're saying, you know, this is a group of people who it's kind of like a shortcut to achieve things, like a dishonorable way of being. So I kind of heard the exact opposite to the truth, really. Later on, I was in London and I saw Grand Lodge. So I went in as a tourist, and you can do that in London, you know, if you want to visit the United Grand Lodge of England. And I was just a boy. I was too young to sort of join. But I think somehow that touched me in my heart. I knew there was something special and positive about it. So years later, I'm studying everything, you know, I can on anything that could lead to a higher state of consciousness or to a more full potential. I'm reading about an order that you may or may not be aware of. It's called SRIA, Societies Rosicrucia in Anglia. In England, it's an order, a Rosicrucian order that Freemasons can join. And when I was reading about that, I learnt about Freemasonry. And I was 22 at the time. And wow, I thought this is like this secret group of people doing good things, improving their character, supporting good things, protecting what's useful and what's positive in the world, without any, you know, want for appreciation, without any want for honours or position. I thought, I've got to join these. So a weird thing happened. Then a few weeks later, I knocked on the door of a Masonic lodge. I didn't know it at the time, but I probably knocked the right way, you know. And no one came to the door. But it's life's strange like that. It was like, because I'd done that, the universe knew. And one of my friends, he said to me, would you like to join Freemasonry? You'd love it. You're very philosophical. And I said, yes, that's exactly what I've been looking for. And I've discovered that quite a few of my friends were Freemasons. I just didn't know it. So I was working as a publisher at a small publishing house that published things on Franz Barden, on meditation. We'll talk about Franz Barden later, you know. Franz Barden is a Czech Hermetic teacher who's wrote some wonderful books, the best books on the subject. And my life really has been dedicated to his teachings above all things. And so I was publishing books about Franz Barden's teachings. And the lodge that I just happened to be proposed into was Burlington number 96 in London, my mother lodge. And it was just right. It couldn't have been guided better. Burlington Lodge is one of the two lodges that founded emulation ritual, which I know is practiced in, you know, across the world, and I know there's a Portuguese version of it. And there were various members there who were philosophers. And this is a very English way of doing things. But we used to have beautiful, beautiful, if you're not a Freemason and you're watching this, Freemasonry has these inspiring ceremonies. They've evolved for many years, and we can see the roots of them. We can see the starts of them in Scotland, and see how they become a little bit more elaborate as time goes on. But these are ceremonies designed to bring around a change, an inspiration for you to be a more virtuous, positive person. But afterwards, there's a big meal. At least in England, there's a big meal. And you have this big meal, and people then afterwards sit around drinking port and talking philosophy. And I was given a copy of Plato's Republic when I was initiated. And for years we studied the Platonic works, the Neoplatonic works, and the commentaries on these. I learned about Iamblichus and Plotinus. My education in spirituality, in a Masonic context, we didn't ever really talk about the actual Masonic rituals. We talked about these. And it was only years later I saw the relation between the two. I realised how lucky I was to have the right mentor. So around this time, I buy a book. It's a book called Beyond the Craft, and it's all the other things you can join in England if you're a Freemason. Now, if you're not aware of this, the Freemasons in England have been organised and numerous and enthusiastic since their founding of their first Grand Lodge in 1717. So now there's all sorts of wonderful things you can join if you're a Freemason and you have time. You could join the operatives, which is a lovely order that protects all the old trade guild rituals. You could join SRIA, which is a contemplative Rosicrucian order. You could join Mark Masonry, which is about seeing the value in things that some people might not understand. You could join the Order of the Secret Monitor, where they really keep an eye on each other and it's a real close-knit, positive set of people. So I bought a book that was all of these, and there's a lot more than I've said. There's a lot more than I've said. And there was an address in the back for the publisher. I thought, wow, I'm in love with this. I want to work for these guys. So imagine me, I'm 22 years old. I'm just an entered apprentice. And I write a letter, dear sir, I love your books. I want to have have you got a job? So I send this off to the managing director. I didn't know at the time. Lewis Masonic was founded sometime in the mid-1800s. It's the world's oldest Masonic publishing company. It's a big thing. But, a bit like maybe my lack of full understanding helped me in martial arts. I tested everything. In this case, I wrote from the heart. And the man who got the letter, his name's David Allen. He's now the Provincial Grand Master of Middlesex. Wonderful man. Was my mentor, really, in business and very much in life. He thought, let's see this man. Let's go and see him. And when we met, we realised we're opposites. We're complete opposite people. All the things I'm not very good at, he's superb at, and all the things I'm interested in, they're sort of areas where he hasn't really had time to look into. And it worked so well, it was like a kind of alchemy. Now I think back to and I think, God, it must have been such a hard thing having me as an employee when I was, a 20-something-year-old. So full of energy, so full of excitement, every day full of ideas. But that's when I first started working for Lewis Masonic. Now, over the years, I worked my way up. I was the salesman to begin with. I had to be the person to go into a Masonic shop, an entered apprentice, and say, we've got a new book. So now I'm taking David's role, he's retired and I'm now in charge of the company. I'm now the owner of the company. Now, because of my joy in Freemasonry, sometimes I will write books about Freemasonry, but Freemasonry is interesting to me just from one reason. I believe it's a wonderful way to fully develop yourself as a person. And I think all the other things, that good things that happen, are a side effect of this. So charity and virtuous action and friendship and joy, they're a side effect of this. For me, what I love about Freemasonry is that it leads to being a well-rounded person. So there are certain aspects of being a Freemason where you learn to memorize the ritual. Now, this doesn't happen in every country, but traditionally, you would learn the ritual off by heart. And this is a big sort of challenge as well. This is like a meditation. And at the time when Freemasonry evolved, there was a belief that might turn out to be true, that whatever you remembered, you became what you memorized. And that was a big thing. That's why they wanted stonemasons to learn all this. Anyway, I've talked so much. You asked my history, and you've got this sort of biography all the way through to the present day, and indeed on to the present book. Maybe we could have a memory palace of each one of the points I made.
Yeah. The memory palace are a thing that is studied in so many different orders and so many different times, and it has a lot of other names. We call some in some ways we call mixed with the astral temple and astral meditation and the castle of memory, and it has so many names. And can you tell us a little bit about what is the memory palace and how can someone who is not Mason use it?
Absolutely. So, so first and foremost, let me explain what the Masonic connection is, and then I'll explain why it's important to you, to anyone watching this. What's the Masonic connection? Well, before speculative Freemasonry, before the kind of Freemasonry we see now, we know that the operative Masons were practicing a memory art. We know this because in Scotland, the Shaw Statutes, the first kind of constitution issued by William Shaw in 1598, they contained a section saying that you need to practice the art of memory. Now, it's really important for me to get across to this. At the time, they didn't have lodge buildings, so it was all in your imagination to some degree. They did have, it's probable they had some kind of sort of ceremony, but the symbols were probably described and imagined. Now, this art of memory, that phrase, at that time, you can see all the publications around the time almost always meant using a memory palace. And it's no coincidence that the first time we ever see a Masonic lodge, it was called a mosaic palace, as in it's got the checkerboard on the floor. So Freemasons started to add symbols to help their memory as time goes on. But it's probable the Freemasons saw their lodge building as a memory palace. What is a memory palace and how can you use it? It's very, very simple. A memory palace is a building in your imagination. And what you do is you visualize the building and you walk around it using the same route again and again and again. And you always stop at the same places. So let's imagine we're talking about your house as a memory palace. Maybe you're sitting in the house right now. Let's imagine you walking up to your front door. You use all the senses. You can feel the wind, you can feel the weather. It's probably a little bit warmer for you than me. You come to the front door and maybe you've got a doorbell. Ding dong. Location number 1, the doorbell. You open the door, you walk into the house. Location number 2, where you hang the coat hanger, where you hang your coats. You walk into your living room. There's a next location, the settee, where you sit down. Location number 3. Location number 4, the television. And you would do this for the whole house. Now in the old manuscripts, the medieval ones, they say you've got to paint. You've got to paint with your mind, paint in your imagination. We would say visualize. Now, how do you use this temple? Well, that's quite exciting. How do you use this memory palace? Well, as soon as you need to remember something, you place it in one of those positions, like you're making a list. So if your wife said to you, right, you're going to the shops, I need you to get me milk, fish, bread, and eggs. Don't just try to remember them normally. No, you need to put them in your memory palace, but not just place them anyway. You have to make it emotionally stimulating. It has to be shocking, funny, silly, rude, scary. It has to be a way you could never ever forget. So let's do it. Let's do that list. You walk up to your front door, you press the doorbell, milk sprays out at you like it's a breast. Oh my God, what's going on? You open the door, you're going to hang your coat up with this fish hanging from the coat hanger. You go into the living room and the whole of your settee has been replaced by a loaf of bread, and on television there's just chickens laying eggs. This silly way of laying things out means that when you go to the supermarket, in 4 hours' time, you don't forget. You think, well, what was that list? You will remember it. Now, this is a very mundane way of using a memory palace, but it's important to be clear that there was a belief at the time, and it was very much practiced in Christianity. I can talk to you, in Christianity, they'd become extremely inspired. There's a text in Corinthians that say, you should build yourself like a temple, like a master builder would. And you've got to build it on a firm foundation of faith. The Christian practitioners of this art read that and thought, yes, I will. I will fill my mind full of virtuous biblical messages. So they used to make memory palaces based on the figures in the Bible. They'd have statues in them that you've probably seen in European churches. I don't know whether you have so there. In a Christian church, they often have a saint, and the saint is holding a book. If he wrote a book, and he's standing on a certain animal that represents him, and maybe if he was hanged, he'd have a noose, or if he was so everything is in that memory image. So all churches were built like memory palaces here. It was deliberately designed because some people couldn't read. It was a good way to learn. So how do you use it in a special way? Well, you need to put symbols in there for things that you want to remember in terms of how to change yourself. St. Thomas Aquinas said, vows of fidelity and virtue slip easily from the mind of men if not associated with a corporeal similitude. If you're going to take a wedding vow, you need a wedding ring. You need something to represent your vow. Now, I know this channel is very interested in Hermetic things. So would you like me to talk a little bit about the Hermetic use of these palaces?
Oh, yes, because our readers, they will probably be interested in how can they use them in other ceremonies, or for example, in their religion practices. and they have to do a lot of things in the temple. And it's similar to the Masonic one. You probably don't know, but one of my books is about the comparison about the rituals in Masonic and the rituals in Umbanda and Candomblé and Kimbanda and Brazilian religions. And I say, how can the slaves practice the same rituals as the King of England? It can't. They must have a common ground because they obviously didn't copy one another, and they use the same roots that when Kennyo told me they were translating the Palace, I said that book is really, really important. And then he said I could interview the author. I was radiant. So please, could you explain to an Hermetic practitioner, even things, and the people from our channel are familiar with Bardon's work. So if you can explain how this palace connects to the Bardon work, they will love you.
That's very interesting. Oh, thank you very much. So, first of all, the practitioners specifically related to memory that you might be aware would be people like Giordano Bruno. And Bruno took an apprentice in Scotland about the time of the Shaw statutes, who became very famous. And he knew Shaw, he knew the man who was, or was at least in the same court as him. The memory palace features, as a Hermetic practice, the Christian practitioners. So remember, almost everyone who knew about the memory art, when they first saw the Hermetica as translated by Marsilio Ficino, they immediately thought the following. Thought, wow. In this text, there's techniques of memorizing statues. It actually says in the Hermetica, it says that if you remember symbols of divinity, it can lift the mind towards it, the higher things. But there's techniques of how to make statues which are empowered divinely. And I thought, well, Hermes is a messenger. Messengers have to memorize. It mentions memory. He's Trismegistus. That might mean the Trinity, the Christian Trinity. And then they thought about their own practices. They thought, well, we memorize statues and symbols of virtues. What if we use these Egyptian techniques to memorize statues within us? Would that lead to divine evolution? Would that lead to divine abilities? So from the Hermetic point of view, everything is made of consciousness. So that's an important thing to remember. Everything's made of consciousness from the Hermetic point of view. Memory is an imprint in your mind. What, however, would be an imprint outside your mind? It's the same art. So from the Hermetic point of view, the circle that would be used to make space is just an external memory palace. It's only an outside one. That's all it is. Now, Bruno, of course, used to use statues. So he'd use statues related to the planets. John Dee, the Queen's astrologer and magician, used a symbol called the hieroglyphic monad. And many practitioners, early practitioners, had their own memory arts, and they're really contemplative. What you would do is you practice using memory as a means, meditating on something. So if you're meditating on an image, let's imagine it's an image of Apollo, and you imagine all the things about Apollo which connect with the sun, and you've got a long list of them in your memory, then it's very easy to focus on that to the point where you become at one with it. And in the Renaissance times, they had a term, they called it contraction. The term actually came from a commentary on Ficino, it's actually from a translation of a commentary that Ficino had written about by Plotinus. The idea is if you meditate on something and you can achieve a oneness where you take on its abilities and powers. So a lot of the Hermetic memory was about that, was about building up an image so powerful that you would become at one with a higher influence. Now in Baden, in Franz Baden, there's a lot of memory practice in Baden, from the beginning where you're just watching your thoughts but you're having to recall them, to the beginning where he says in Initiation to Hermetics you need to make the theoretical part of the book your mental property. And he actually says in there, the biggest, the most common cause of failure in his system of Hermetics is not fully understanding the theory. Later on in Baden's practice, there are other things you need to have memorized. In a weird way, there are certain gestures where you've practiced an art so long that you make a gesture that connects with that force or ability. This is perhaps the beginning of being able to sort of put a memory into these sort of other places. Then in his second and third book, you need to start to use a memory system. And luckily, there's one already in place. The most obvious one is in the third book, which is on Kabbalah, the key to the true Kabbalah. This has a memory wheel on the front, which is just like the one used by Giordano Bruno. Now, it's going to take a lot longer here for me to sort of explain how to use a memory wheel, but it's a method of connecting with the Hebrew letters in this case, or he's using the German, but you'd use your own letters. And this is a meditative art that you'd have to be able to undertake in order to be able to do this work. Now, I want you to please forgive me for an aside here. There is some evidence, though Freemasonry is most certainly universal and people's opinions on it vary, there's some evidence that some Freemasons in the 1700s were also practicing contemplating Hebrew letters. We've actually got a number of texts, manuscripts, where we can see they were doing this. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't most Masons. Yeah. So just like now, most Freemasons are interested in being good people and cultivating their character and helping the world. But just like now, there are some who are more interested in the deeper interpretations of it. There were then as well, and they were memorizing and contemplating Hebrew letters, or at least there's some evidence that a few of them were. So I just thought I'd mention that. Any thoughts on?
Yes, I'd like to talk about what new books. This one, Kennyo, it is still in crowdfunding, and how can people support this?
Marcelo, first of all, I would like to thank you, Martin, to be here with us, and thank you for opening this channel to us to talk about this book, A Masonic Policy. I had the pleasure to translate to Portuguese, and it's a great contribution to Brazilian Freemasons, because I was talking with Martin. We don't have here this custom to make the ritual in memory. We used to read the monitor in lodge. It's very different to America and England. So a lot of lodges is doing a effort to do the right thing, to memory the phrases, and to do the best ritual all members deserve. So I think this is a good step to help our brothers to improve the ritual work, the flow work in our lodges. Uh, you can see the link in the video. So the Catarse campaign is open until the 15th February. So everyone who wants the book can participate in the crowdfunding, and we have this happiness to bring Martin and his book to Brazil, and I hope it's just the beginning, just the first of a lot of good books from Lewis, and it's an honor for us to help to bring to Brazil the best Masonic literature we have in the world.
Yeah. And Martin, I would like to say that I know Kennyo for about like 15 years or more, and his work in the Brazilian Freemason is one of the best here. And his translation work and his uh, research work, and you couldn't be at better hands than No Esquadro.
Wonderful. And now, well, thank you very much. It's lovely to hear what you're both saying. And here's a message I have for anyone watching this. You live in a time where your memory is being neglected. You've got a mobile phone to dial the numbers. You use a sat nav to find things around the place. You don't need to remember it, you just look it up on the internet. This is like walking with crutches or being in a wheelchair when you don't need it. And your mind is not getting the kind of stimulation it needs. Now, memorization is good for the mind in many different ways. They've done studies into this, and people who practice memory, especially the memory palace, they are far more aware of what's going on. Their observation skills are higher. We're not quite sure, but there's some connection between memory and awareness. Likewise, people who practice memory, they suffer from less cognitive decline as they get older. And furthermore, people who practice memory have more situational memory. So they know where they put their keys or who they're talking to. So I would ask anyone watching this to take this video as an inspiration. From this moment onwards, you are going to use the whole of your life as training. When you drive your car, the same route 3 times, on the 3rd time, do it by memory. If you have to look something up 2 or 3 times, memorize it. But not just memory, use everything as training. When you write your signature on the bottom of something, that's your calligraphy training. When you talk to someone, that's you training your speech making. Use everything. Now to Freemasons in Brazil, the memorization of your ritual is a very important, wonderful part of the Masonic tradition. We, Freemasons, are the protectors of the memory arts. Everyone else is letting go of it. And you can trace this memory back. A Freemason in the 1700s or the 18th century, they would take time every evening to settle down, to calm their mind, and to rehearse their ritual. This would be a nightly joy. And they believed that every time they said those words, they became at one with them, and they became more like it. Now, we live in a world nowadays where most people spend most of their time watching television. That's actually what they do. About 6 to 8 hours a day is meant to be the average time someone watches television. This is quite amazing. You know, they must put it on when they wake up and put it on. It's quite amazing. As a Freemason, I think it would be a beautiful, beautiful thing for you to practice your own meditation. Remember the term meditation? Meditatio is Latin. It's a Western term. To your own memorization in your evenings, and a joy to perform it for others. Now, there's going to be some people, that may find this tricky. If you're one of the people that struggles with memory, this is what you need to do more, not less. We only find balance in life by practicing the things we find hardest. And if your mind isn't able to form memories as easy, then that shows it's good for rigorous exercise. You've got to keep doing this. And I think it would be a lovely thing. If you're not a Mason watching this, and I know there's lots of people that aren't, the book's in 3 sections. We have the classical art of memory, which was used for speech making in ancient Greece. So there was a mystical side of that, which you'll read about, how some people even got arrested for the mystical memory in ancient Greece and Rome. Then the Christian art of memory. And this is a really exciting part. Seriously, if you're a Christian, you have to know about this. This is a really exciting part of your tradition. And you can understand a lot more from it there as well. It's a lovely thing. And you'll see books on the memory palaces that they used to use. You could buy a book and, it's have an angel as a memory palace. If you were suffering from anxiety, it'd be a calming memory palace. If you were suffering from some other sense of depression, there'd be an uplifting one. You could buy pictures that you'd use for memory practice. And then finally the Masonic, and how this tradition, it flows, this memory tradition flows for everything. To know more about how your mind is functioning and how you can be more friends with your mind. Who couldn't do with being able to recall what they want to recall when they want to more.
And to our viewers, that is something that I have said like 1,000 times, that visualization and imagination are the main tools of the magician. And this book that Kennyo is publishing in Brazil, the translation of Martin Faulks' work, is the best book on improving these visualization techniques and mind and memory. So you go now to catarse.me/Palácio Mosaico and get it now. Well, thank you, Martin, so much. It has been a real honor to talk to you. And thank you, Kennyo, for making this encounter possible.
And yes, may this be the beginning of something else, something further, something that grows. And yes, I hope to see you in Brazil in not too distant future, if fate guides that.
Well, thank you, Martin and Kennyo and everyone who watched this. And I really hope that this is just the first interview. I told to Kennyo they will be bringing a lot of Lewis works to Brazil. I will help you. And I will interview, with the grace of God, a lot of authors. And it's going to be a beautiful bridge that has been built today. Thank you so much, Martin and Kennyo and everyone else. And this is interview number 562. And so if you are watching us, please stay in and press the buttons. And everyone that you know, I'm really nervous now. And I'll see you in the next Boteco dos Illuminati.